Hope y'all are doing well today. So today what we're going to do is I am going to talk about some basic instructional design intro stuff, but the main thing that I want to talk about is I want to talk about the history of instructional design, like the model, the main model that we use, the ADDIE model. Let's see, let me just make sure everything is working here tech-wise. Looks like we are good to go. All right, so I always do that. Okay. So hopefully, if you're watching this live stream right now, one of the things that I totally recommend you do if you have not done it is to go and watch my video with Dr. Branson, who created the ADDIE model, because I consider him one of the founders of our field. So last week I talked about the founding of instructional design. I talked about introductory stuff. I talked about the just checking about questions and stuff. I talked about whether there was any kind of how the field started and the basic history. But what happened is, so after our field started, there became a time where an instructional design model was created. And basically that model was called the ADDIE model. It was created in the mid-70s with Florida State and the U.S. military. And basically the backstory, and you got to watch my video because you got to see Dr. Branson tell the story himself. But the story is that the military came to him and said, hey, we need some kind of systematic process to design instruction. So him and his team, he was the lead on the team, came up with this idea for the ADDIE model, and they basically built it. Now, when they built it, he didn't, it's kind of funny because he's like, he just says that he didn't see anything like brilliant about it or anything. It was just a model for the military. But what happened is the military, the person that they developed it for, their project, became promoted to a very high-ranking general in the Army. Once this person was promoted to general in the Army, they went and pushed the model to all the branches of the military, as well as the whole entire Army. So everyone was all of a sudden using it. That's why it became very famous, which is really fascinating. So let's get in. I'm going to show you guys the basic model. I'm going to show you guys kind of an overview, and I'm going to break it down a little bit, what this model looks like, and talk about some more history stuff about it too as well. Okay, so let's see. I am going to, oops, hate when things just pop up on my screen. I am going to shrink myself down a little bit. Make myself nice and tiny so that you can see what's on my screen. Okay. Let's see. Can I make this a little bigger on my screen? Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so what you see on the screen here is basic. This is instructional design. This is the first part of it, at least. And I want to kind of break this down a little bit. So the first thing that I'm showing you here is really the front-end analysis section. And then we get into the beginning of the ADDIE model. So let me go through this front-end analysis section. Basically, the point of this front-end analysis is to determine if there is a problem. And let me show you another view of that. Let's see. I'm going to go into my instructional design book, which if you don't have a copy, remember this is free, and you should be, if you're in my class, you've got to be reading it. Okay, so the first thing that we do right here is we get into this thing called front-end analysis, performance analysis. Whoever you're talking to, people like to, one thing that bothers me about all fields is everyone has to have like their own version. So we can't just like call it the same thing. I should call it like finding out the problem analysis. Like we all have like our own version. Okay, whatever. So people call it performance analysis. Front-end analysis, you will hear people called performance improvement. You will have process engineers, business architecture, all kinds of different fields are the ones developing this stuff. Oh, and let me just make sure that my questions are up here in case if there are any. So basically, what is the point of this performance analysis? The point of performance analysis is to determine what the problem, well, it's not really simple in practice, but to say it like that, it really is. So the first thing we do in performance analysis, oh, let me get my mouse back here. And let's see, let me, hold on a second. Got to look at my screen here. I want to pull up my performance analysis section. Here we go. Here we go. Glad I have all these images here. I can just pull them right up for y'all. Okay, so here is what this performance analysis looks like. First step. Step 1, determine the problem. What is it? What's the problem? So we figure out what's the problem. We ask who, what, where, when, and why. Then we figure out what's the cause of the problem, because just because I think I know the cause of a problem does not mean it is the cause of the problem. I use the example in the book, something called the 5 why exercise. And I keep asking why 5 times. And I think the example that I might have used in the book is about a car that was damaged on a street. And it was, you know, why is the car damaged on the street? Why was there a hit and run on the car? And the first thing it says, well, someone was driving illegally. So that's the problem. We need to pass a law saying like you can't hit and run. But, oh, maybe there is a law saying that already. The cause of my car getting hit was that my garage was messy and I couldn't park my car in my garage. That was the cause. Now, yes, we could blame it on the person who had hit my car and damaged it. But to solve the solution, you need to go past that and go back much further to find the real cause of the problem. Otherwise, all we're doing is putting a Band-Aid on a problem. You cannot do this in a system. You cannot do this in a company, or the problem will just continue to keep coming up. If you keep parking if you just pass more laws against hitting a car, like hit and runs, guess what? It's still continuing to happen. We're not really solving the problem. We're trying to, but we're not. We're putting a Band-Aid on the problem. We have to actually solve problems. That means going back even further and saying, how do we stop this from getting to this point? It's like one of the things, so I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I get people who are like, what do I do when I'm in a headlock? How do I get out of that? And the best answer by the instructor is, you don't get put in a headlock. When you're in the headlock, you're already so far deep in a place you shouldn't be. You've already made 10 other mistakes to get to that point. Let's start preventing all those mistakes so you don't get put in that situation. Now, we'll teach you how to get out of it, but you shouldn't be in the situation in the first place. So we have to go back in time. It's like, you know, I'll tell people it's like having a big infection on your finger and putting a Band-Aid on it. Well, the Band-Aid isn't going to cure that infection. You know, you cannot solve problems like that. Okay, so let me go back up to this slide I was at originally here. Here we go. So we do this performance analysis, and basically what we're trying to determine is training the problem. Is training the problem? Because if training is not the problem, then the person whose problem it is, they go solve it. Like it might be a programming issue in the system. It might be a finance issue. It might be a claims issue. It might be a communication in the company issue. It might be like we didn't get the right message out. There are all kinds of stuff. Could be the problem. But if it's a training problem, we give it to the instructional designers and tell them to come up with a solution and solve it. So as a performance improvement specialist, as someone doing a front-end analysis or performance improvement or front-end analysis, whatever you want to call it, my goal is to determine if it's a training problem, communication problem, whatever. Okay? If it is, so we're assuming it is, because you're here watching this as a trainer or instructional designer, we're assuming that is the issue. We give it to the instructional designers, and they have to develop some kind of training. Now, it's kind of funny. So when I was in corporate, I was having this conversation with this guy. We went out to lunch, and we were talking about me getting promoted. I was a level 1 consultant. But in consultant, there's like multiple levels. I was the beginning level. I was the first one after I had got my master's. And I was up for promotion. Well, I was pushing for a level 2 promotion. Very early too. I had only worked there for 8 months, and usually it takes a minimum of 2 years. So I was pushing for it. So in order for me to push for it, I had to get some high up people on my side to basically make the case for me that I deserved this promotion. So I was having lunch with this guy. He was a much more senior person than me. Not an instructional designer, trainer, or anything, but he's like, you're a trainer. You just design training. You just, anyone can do it. You just design it. But the way he was saying it made it sound like there's nothing to this. You just put stuff down, go in and talk to people about it. Like, that's it, and It's not that whatsoever. You can do that. You can make, but that's bad quality training. You know, I can do all kinds of things bad quality. Someone could tell me to design a logo and I can draw a circle and color, have my 5-year-old color it in and say, here you go, here's a logo. But that doesn't mean it's a good logo, right? We hire a graphic artist and have someone design a professional looking logo. Same thing with training, no different than that. So we've determined training's the problem. We do something called the ADDIE model. No matter what anyone tries to tell you. So let's talk about this ADDIE model of instructional design. So the ADDIE model, as I told you in the beginning of this today, was created by Dr. Robert Branson for the Florida State, 1970s with the military. And it's a systematic process to design. It's not even a systematic process to design instruction. It's just a systematic process to design anything. So the ADDIE model is, and let me read it and then let's talk about it a little bit. So the ADDIE model is you do and perform an analysis. Whatever that analysis says, you design based on the analysis. Then you develop based on that design. Then you implement it. And then you evaluate and judge whether it was whatever you did was effective or not. So now we do this for instructional design. We analyze the problem. We analyze our learners, our context. Then we design the instruction. Then we develop it using like PowerPoint or Articulate or whatever. Then we implement it into a company and then we evaluate its effectiveness. But we can use this process to build a house. I can analyze the materials, the foundation, the cost, all that kind of stuff. I design the house, you know, the blueprint, and pick out all the materials and stuff like that. Then we build it. And that's also, when it's done, it's implemented, we can move in, right? Moving in is the implementation. And then when you live there, you evaluate whether they did a good job building or not. Like, things aren't falling apart. You don't have like a big like water stain up on the ceiling and stuff like that, like all that good stuff. You can use, this is a process used for anything. We have a similar process in many other fields. For example, in computer science, they have a method called the waterfall. Waterfall, it's the same thing as ADDIE. It's just more geared towards development of software, but it's the same exact thing. There's no difference. It's just a basic process to build and design. That's all ADDIE was. When these guys created it, they created a process or a model. People get so hung up on this terminology. And it's like almost like we have to define what it is now because people are so hung up on it. But when they developed it at a time, they were just trying to help the military structure design training in some way that was effective. That's it. That was their goal. But this is a process that we have to design and develop instruction. And it has become a quality checklist. And what's happened is, you know, the way they wrote ADDIE at first, like you look at my picture here and I have like, almost like looks like analysis is step 1, design is step 2, development step 3, implement step 4. And in some ways it is like that. But there's nothing that says like, you have to do this. You can't like start design while you're working on analysis. There's nothing about ADDIE that says that. And so what's happened is over the years, a lot of people looked at this model and they said, well, you know what? When I start analysis, I also start my prototype. That's different than what this ADDIE model says. So I'm going to make a new model and I'm going to call it, I'll just make up the Pastore model, my model. And then the next person looked at it and said, well, you know what? I do some communication in here, or I have like a quality check after analysis. I have my clients check, and this ADDIE model, I don't see that on this image. So I'm going to call this like the Ray model. So now we have a Pastore model. We got a Ray model. We got all kinds of models. And the interesting thing about all of these models is that they are all still ADDIE. All they've done is try to define how they do things in the process, which ADDIE never attempted to do. And the reason that I don't mind it, but what I do mind, I don't mind if someone came out and said, hey, you know what? Here's a very effective way to do like analysis, design, and development. Here's a very effective way to do the first part of the ADDIE model and make it very iterative. Great. That's brilliant. But what people have done is they've learned a good marketing technique, and a good selling point is to say, replacing ADDIE model with model of the day. So what they're doing is they're trying to sell you this solution that is like supposed to be life-changing and industry-changing. And it's not. It's the same thing we've been doing since the 70s. And not only is it not changed anything, they're trying to act like they're different than the ADDIE model when they are actually taking the ADDIE model and just defining how we do some of these steps. And it was very interesting in my discussion with Robert Branson, the founder of the ADDIE model, who I said, you know, people have complained that the ADDIE model is very linear. And what was happening is people, let's say I was developing like 10 modules for a client. What would happen is someone would do analysis for all 10 of those modules before starting any design. And I think people are confused that that's what the ADDIE model originally said you were supposed to do for some reason. I think a lot of this problem has to go to the way it was actually taught in master's programs back at the time. I think there was just a lot of lack of understanding. And one of the reasons for that lack of understanding is because most of the people teaching in those programs were ed psychologists who did not have a corporate background. There was no such thing as instructional design at the time. So think about that. And that got pushed through the 80s into the 90s even. Instructional design was a baby field where it became from ed psychology. And a lot of the people did not have experience in the field. And even today, a lot of faculty have not really been instructional designers. They've done some consulting work in the field maybe, but they've not been out there working full-time in the field. So there's all these misunderstandings like that when you haven't really applied this stuff before and you don't know how it really goes on projects. So consider that. But what was happening is people would assume that, like, yes, I was developing these 10 modules. I have to do analysis for all 10. No, that's not true. If I did the analysis for module 1, I can start design and development on module 2 while I'm still working on the analysis for module 3. And there's other ways to shortcut and make the process very iterative. But the thing that's really interesting about that is regardless of how you say you can do, like some people try to say that the process is too linear, but it will, no matter what someone tells you, or whatever kind of image they show you with like all kinds of circles and connecting the dots and stuff, the process is always going to be linear. You cannot start designing a solution when you don't know what the problem is. You just can't. There's this thing, and Dr. Branson mentions it in his interview, called time. And there's an order of time. Like you can say you want like something to happen like 4 o'clock. If something's going to happen at 4 o'clock, like you can't go like back in time. You can't like if something's going to happen at 3:59 and then 4 and then 4:01 then 4:02, like you can't like have it happen at a different time in relation to it. Like if the sun's going to rise at 5:25, you can't make the sun rise at 5:20. It's not going to happen. And like the sun's going to rise and then the moon's going to rise, and that like the sun sets, moon rises, sun rises. You can't change the order of that stuff, is what I'm trying to say. You cannot change the order of that, no matter what. And it's the same thing with instructional design. So let me give you an example. If you don't know, so I just gave you an example of the problem. But like if you don't know what your objectives are, how could you start developing instruction? How could you start development? You couldn't. It'd be impossible. Now, maybe I could start to create a prototype of a skeleton of what it's going to look like, but I can't start doing any real development yet until I have storyboards. I can't develop the storyboards until I have the objectives. How could you, if I haven't looked at their technology and what the company has, like done an analysis, how can I give this company a solution? How can I start anything? You cannot. Certain things have to happen in a certain order, or you really risk failure. And that's another problem we have in our field, is that what happens is a lot of instructional designers can only do one thing. Like they might only be able to develop computer-based training, use Articulate or Captivate. So whenever they have a client, they go in and say, I'm going to develop an Articulate for you, without even hearing the problem. They have a solution already. The problem with that is we have a lot of really terrible training out there. In fact, I did a video called E-Learning Sucks. Go watch that video because I talk about that problem. I have been through so many computer-based training tutorials that makes me want to pull my hair out. Literally. They make me want to gag, vomit. I cannot deal with it because it is so bad, so unmotivating, put together so poorly, because it probably wasn't even the appropriate medium to develop what they were trying to do in the first place. I would have rather had just a Word document that I could have read all the information, because they didn't even need to use the images where they did in that. Like we're doing a lot of stuff because we think it's cool or the way it's supposed to be, not because it's effective all the time. Sometimes it's effective just to give someone a piece of paper with information on it and tell them to read it and memorize it. Like, what are your goals? What are your objectives? Design for that. And you guys will learn to do that. Those of you in my class watching this, I know you guys are new in my class watching this, we'll learn how to do all that stuff. But sometimes we do things because we feel like we should. So, okay. Let's see. Oh, that was I was like, what is that? And it was a message. Okay. So that is the basic history of the ADDIE model. But the basic steps are analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. In some ways, once you learn how to do this, you learn how the process works. You learn when you can cut corners, when you can't, and stuff like that. And then we have a lot of these different instructional design models. So let me just talk about some of the most popular ones. So I'll talk about the two most popular ones that you will hear about, and you should know going into interviews as an instructional designer. You should be very familiar with Dick and Carey. It is the instructional design model used in academia as the most popular. My personal thoughts about Dick and Carey is that I think the book is really dry. I'm not a fan. I think it's informative to an extent, but it doesn't, their model, I don't like, I could never, I'm just glad that I don't practice their model, because I feel like it's very cumbersome and just not how it works in practice. Now, another model, and this wasn't one of the ones I was going to mention, that you don't really see written about anymore, and not a lot of people talk about it. And I think it's because the authors, I think they both passed away at this point, which is sad. And I think that's why we don't hear about it. And I feel like their book was probably one of the best instructional design books I'd ever read. And it was Smith and Reagan. I really, really, really like the Smith and Reagan model. They were one of the only authors that I've ever seen actually describe design correctly and the way you're supposed to actually do it, because Dick and Carey do a terrible job, and most of the other authors that I've read do a terrible job of describing design. But Smith and Reagan do an excellent job of defining design, and I do in my book, because I made sure to focus on that section because it's so bad in so many other books. It's one of the focus areas that I have was on design. Okay, so and the other model I think you need to be familiar with as an instructional designer is rapid design. What that means, how to be rapid, what agile, the term like agile means and stuff like that. And if you're taking my class right now, we learn about that at the end of this course. It's a much more advanced model, and it's really, you learn about rapid design as you become a practitioner in the field. Learn when and why and how you're supposed to modify the process. You really have to learn the process in depth at first. Okay, let's see. What else do I want to talk about today? I think those are the big things I wanted to talk about. Let me see if there's any other images here that I want to show you quickly. That might be it. What is this? Oh, that's front-end analysis. Okay, let me go back to this final image here. So this was trying to show this whole analysis. Oh, no, I don't want to show that again. That's not what I want to show. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it. That was just a more in-depth analysis, which I don't need to talk about right now. I think I'm actually going to be talking about analysis the next video that I do. This is my whole book laid out, all the chapters. I made a bunch of these images for you guys when I developed it, just so I knew what was happening. But yeah, this is the whole process. So if there are any questions, I can answer questions, but that's the gist of today. I wanted to talk about the history. Go watch the video. Go watch my interview with Robert Branson. Really interesting to hear from the founder of the ADDIE model. Really cool. And it's a cool history to learn about this and kind of see what's been happening. So anyway, y'all, that's it. And have a great day. And I will be doing another instructional design video. So every 2 weeks, I'm going to do one. I do more videos, but I have a planned video every 2 weeks on instructional design. Next week, I've got an esports video coming on Tuesday, and I said 2, but next week is actually going to be more like 2:30 because I got a big interview coming up next week, which is really cool that you guys are going to enjoy watching. So anyway, later, guys. Have a great day. Have a good rest of the week. It's Tuesday already, and I will see you all later.